Well, members of council will call the meeting to order. Welcome to viewing audience on YouTube. If we could please stand for a moment of silent reflection, and maybe we just remind everyone the loss of a Team LaSalle member, Agatha Armstrong, which is a dear loss to our municipality and her family, and remain standing for O Canada, please. Thank you. Members of council, any conflict of interest for items on the agenda? None noted. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held April 13th, 2021 be adopted as presented. Moved by Deputy Mayor Meloche and Councillor Renault. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Mayor's comments. I have a couple. And then Mr. Militia will speak after my comments in relation to Agatha. In response to Ontario government's new enhanced public health measures announced on April 15th, LaSalle has closed outdoor amenities to the public to help slow down the spread of COVID-19. This means the basketball courts, the pickleball courts, tennis courts, soccer fields, baseball diamonds, volleyball courts, and the skateboard park are all closed. We understand some of our residents are frustrated, as we all are, with the new guidelines, but we ask for your patience and to please follow the rules. Maintain safe physical distance at least 2 meters apart from anyone who does not live with you. When you are walking outdoors, only do so with those with whom you live with and or with one other person who lives alone. If physical distancing is difficult, be sure to wear a mask. Please get the vaccine as soon as you're eligible. Information about vaccines and how to register can be found at WeVax, which is WEVAX.ca. Last week was National Volunteers Week. National Volunteers Week reflects individuals' generosity and the power we have when we work together. I hope that you have read our post on the town's Facebook and Instagram pages. Last week and this week, we are sharing posts that highlight some of our community members who volunteer their time to give back, and we thank them for their volunteering efforts. Mr. Militia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few weeks ago, we announced that Fire Chief Dave Sutton was retiring after over 35 years of service. Unfortunately, last week, another member of our LaSalle family left us under not nearly the same joyous circumstances. After a long municipal career, of which not nearly enough was spent with us at the town of LaSalle, we're saddened to announce the passing of our Director of Council Services and Town Clerk, Mrs. Agatha Robertson. Agatha was one of the most positive and determined individuals I've ever met. And she used that positivity and determination to battle cancer for over a decade. As we all know, and unfortunately have all had some experience with, winning is different with cancer. It is difficult to define. But sometimes winning is battling cancer, which Agatha did ferociously. Her life could have been over when she was first diagnosed, but she chose to battle. She chose to fight, enjoy life, embrace new challenges, and live on. In true Agatha fashion, there was not going to be any pity party for her. She did not want her illness to define her, and it didn't. She never wanted anyone to feel sorry for her, and we shouldn't start now. We should remember this. I can remember vividly last March in 2020, talking intensely with her. So for those that aren't aware, that means that when two Italians are talking to each other at very high volumes, and pleading with her to begin working from home as opposed to coming into the office. At one point, after begging and suggesting that I would revoke her access card, she thankfully agreed. And I thought I'd run a marathon and won the lottery all on the same day. There was certainly no pushing her around. Agatha had an incredible career, starting at the City of Windsor within the social services area, then moving on to a new challenge in the licensing and enforcement area, and then yet another new challenge in the clerks and council services area, before she decided to leave the comfort of the City of Windsor and join Team LaSalle. We like to say she saw the light, eventually being promoted to the Director of Council Services and Town Clerk. A career full of learning and challenges and never afraid. Although she was with Team LaSalle for too short of a time, her legacy will live on. Much like throwing a rock into a pond, her impact has had many, many ripples, some of which we are only now coming to realize. Even with her extremely busy life, loving husband, children, family, friends, trips and vacations, work, professional life, and unfortunately, the myriad of treatments that she went through. She was a mentor to many, including me, and always made time. We lost the ultimate professional, giving mentor, most positive person, loving mother and wife, and a great friend. Although you left us too soon, we will cherish the time we had together and remember the lessons you taught us and the advice that you freely gave. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with Agatha's family members, including husband Craig, children Cameron and Cassandra, and stepdaughter Faith, and with her many friends, including her posse, as those on the call, some of which are on the call, know who you are, and friends, as we try to get on with life without Agatha. You are and will continue to be missed. Your memory will be eternal. Rest in peace, Agatha. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for this indulgence. Mr. Mayor, I believe you're muted.
Sorry, thank you, Joe. I said thank you for the kind words and God rest her soul. Before we go to the potential first item, Joe, maybe you can just enlighten council on how the procedure should go if there is a procedure to be followed.
Absolutely. After conferring with the deputy clerk, again, we don't normally get a whole lot of reconsideration motions. But again, the process that has to be followed with respect to a motion to reconsider is a two-step process. A motion needs to be put on the table, and the motion needs to come from the folks that voted in the majority. That would mean that Mayor Bondi, Councillor Richo Spagnolo, Councillor Reno, or Councillor Giardi can make the motion to reconsider. Once that is, whoever makes the motion to reconsider can make, if they choose, a brief statement as to the reasons why they justify the reconsideration of this motion. But please note that the motion at this point is without debate. All 7 members of council, provided that it is seconded, all 7 members of council can vote on the reconsideration. However, this must pass by a 2/3 majority vote. So if a motion is not made to reconsider, we will just move on to the next item on the agenda. So I think that is the process that we normally would follow. I just want to ensure, looking over to Madam Clerk, that she does concur with that interpretation.
Thank you, Mr. Militia. So is there a motion to reconsider moved by Councillor Edicho Spagnolo to reconsider? Is there a seconder? Councillor Desjardins. On the motion to reconsider, all in favor? Okay, that passes, so it's open. Okay, so now Mrs. Phoebe can join, correct? Okay.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Mrs. Phoebe can make a presentation at this point.
Okay. Mrs. Phoebe, if you wouldn't mind with your presentation. And just to remind you, there's 5-minute time limit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank everybody, Mr. Mayor, councilors, for allowing me the opportunity to do this. Last year, when I did present this, a motion was passed in order to give us the equivalent of the cost of a chain link fence that the town of LaSalle would normally pay for in order for us to construct our own. We did our research, and due to COVID, it was very, very difficult to get any contractors to build that fence. And then one of the other, besides the quotes, there's increased costs and you couldn't get materials. So therefore, we had asked for an extension. Meanwhile, at the same time, with the waterfront project, we didn't really, town of LaSalle really did not know what that land was going to be slated for. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe even today, we don't know what's going to happen with that property on the Dasty property. It could be commercial, it could be a parking lot, or it could be parkland. So having said that, we had looking at the agreement that was given to us by the town of LaSalle to consider building our own. One of the other things was that we would own and maintain that fence. We had a difficult time coming to terms and accepting the fact that we would have to own and maintain a fence for a parcel of land that we don't know what it's slated for, number one. In addition to that, one of the major concerns as well has always been traffic. We have a major highway here, even though it is a community safety zone, it's a Motor City Speedway. With the open air space that's there now, because we've always had privacy with the Dasty home blocking it, what we're seeing now is the noise is amplified. So given the fact of the traffic, lights from the traffic that are shining into our home, which we have a bedroom and rec room facing that side. So we're getting a lot of light and noise coming from there, and the basketball court. The newly labeled sports zone is slated for kind of our backyard or the residents of Adams Lane. And everybody on Adams Lane is all for that. And it's a great thing. We support that 100%. But I can see with the construction and everything else and the cost of construction and things going on in that parkland, again, more noise and more things that we have to deal with. What else did I have on there? The future development type of thing, the noise, volleyball courts, tennis courts. And most importantly, I've been a resident, my family's been a resident here for 25 years. We've never asked town council for anything. For years we supported Strawberry Festival, lived with the traffic and everything else there. And it's just unbearable to live with this noise and this open-ended thing. So I think in everybody's best interest, it kind of makes sense, not knowingly what's going on with the waterfront project for the town of LaSalle, to do the right thing and put up a privacy fence now, as opposed to even having to change it later when it's slated for something that would actually legally entitle us to having a privacy fence. And I just wanted at this point, I'm not sure if I'm over my time because I haven't got the timer going. I want to thank Kevin Miller as well for, working with us on this and giving us the extension to help us do this and get to the point where we're at today for reconsideration. And also all the counselors, they've acknowledged my email and have made some, efforts and contacted me and heard my voice as to what our concerns are. So basically, that's what we're looking at: the noise, the traffic, the unknown factors, and maintenance of the fence for life, not knowingly what's going there. Thank you. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Thank you, Mrs. Phoebe. Does Mr. Miller want to say anything at this time?
Your worship and members of council, I don't really have anything to add. What I would say is that I don't think there is a change in administration's recommendation from what was put forward back last year. We would stay with the recommendation to council that in accordance with other developments that we proceed with the construction of a chain link fence, or as the agreement spelled out, that we would forward the cost of the chain link fence and the owner could construct their own wooden fence. The reason that the agreement had put on the task of ownership or the maintenance of the fence to that owner is that when we construct a chain link fence, that is really low cost maintenance for the town. We really don't want to be in the business of maintaining wooden privacy fences at this locations or others. So if in fact it was going to become a wooden fence, then it would become the ownership and maintenance of the owner. So I think with those comments, Your Mayor, Ms. Phoebe is correct. The site plan at this point did not definitively note future development of that lands. It still sits vacant, although it could be commercial parking or an extension of the park in a future phase of the development. But even at that point, that would still continue forward on those fencing issues. So with those, if the council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But again, administration would stick with the original recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'll open it up to council questions. Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. Through you to, I guess maybe Mr. Miller for this one. I know we haven't really decided what we're doing with that parcel of land yet, but when we talk about it eventually being commercial parking, in other circumstances, we put up a privacy something or another to block the lights from the cars, the noise and all that stuff. I don't know what we did on our parking lot on the corner of Beaumier in front, if that has a privacy fence, or would we be more accustomed to doing a chain link, but putting in some sort of privacy landscaping?
I think if we go forward with commercial in the future, those would be done in concert with the private sector. And we would probably put that kind of onus on that developer or that proponent at the time. Again, it wouldn't be the town that would be in the business of constructing that privacy fence. The commercial component that we would go in there wouldn't be sort of town owned. Peter?
For some reason, I had this sense that someone was going to ask about the parking lot at Beaumier, so I had to pull up the pictures. There is a chain link fence along one side of the of that parking lot that's on Beaumier in front. So the side yard of the house that faces Front Road has a chain link fence, and that looks like it was installed by the town because that looks as though it meets our requirements. The house that has frontage on Beaumier has a privacy fence, again, built, it looks as though it's a relatively older fence, and it looks as though it is certainly something that is kind of jogging along the property line. I don't have the exact location and dimensions of what it is, but it's a mixture of both types of fences at that particular location.
Thank you, Peter. Follow up, Deputy Mayor, or are you satisfied?
Not yet, in a minute, thank you.
While you're thinking, we'll go to Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, Mr. Bondi. My question was along the same line. I do think that since the Phoebes moved into that property 25, 27 years ago, things certainly have changed, and they don't have their privacy that they had on Adams Lane, which has always been just kind of a quiet little street. And I do feel that a privacy fence would be beneficial for them when we move forward for the new development, because we don't know whether it's going to be parking. We don't know what it's going to be. My concern, though, is the maintenance of it. I think that asking us to be responsible for it for a lifetime is a little much. So I would go along with putting in a privacy fence, but not with our maintenance forever. Just a couple of comments.
Thank you. Councillor Riccio Spagnolo, and then Councillor Carrick.
Through you, Mayor Bondi. I echo Councillor Desjardins' comments. I do believe that we should go with a wooded fence, more of a privacy, as well as if we're going to do it, just do it right at the one first time, as opposed to a chain link fence and then go back and perhaps remove it in a couple of years. But I do agree with the maintenance might be a little bit too much for the town to adhere to. So, but I do think that with all the traffic and the lights and the noise and how busy and congested Front Road will be and is currently, I do think that the wooded fence would be a better barrier for her noise and aid with all the noise. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. So my vote hasn't changed. I'll still support the wooden fence. I think individually this situation is unique. We ended up tearing down the house and we cleared it all out and we exposed the backyard or their side yard. And I think it's Highway 18. It's very, very busy. We bought the property. It's potentially going to be commercial or it's going to be a parking lot. I would prefer a parking lot, to be honest with you, because if anybody goes down there on the weekends, especially with the refresh of the park that's going on behind it, that it's crazy busy down there with the boat ramps. And then we're going to have the rowing club eventually. They're going to have everybody using the parks. So the overflow, and it'd make more sense to have some kind of parking. At least that's what I'm thinking. Along 18 highway for people to be able to park and have access to overflow parking. That's what I'm thinking, unless it ends up being commercial. But at the same time, again, I think that I would support the wooden fence and I haven't changed my position. Thank you.
Mr. Militia, then Councillor Reno.
I believe Mr. Miller had a comment that he was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see him. Sorry, Kevin.
I just wanted to comment. A couple of members of council indicated that we could construct the fence, but they had concerns about maintenance. Unless we enter into some sort of an agreement with this owner that could be binding on future owners, I think we would need to resolve ourselves to the fact that we're going to become the long-term carekeepers of the fence. Miss Phoebe wins the lottery and moves tomorrow, and there's a brand new owner in there. They're going to have no idea about the arrangement that was made with this owner potentially and the town. And when something goes miss, then they're going to say that they didn't know anything about it. So without a binding agreement with the property owner, I think members of council should also recognize that likely in the long term, without that agreement, maintenance is going to fall to the town.
Dominic, you want to add something?
Sure thing. I just wanted to jump in quickly on that note. I know in the first draft of the agreement, and I was just reviewing it here as well, it was to be constructed on their property, on the resident's property. So certainly if it's council's wishes to construct the wooden fence, if it is on their property, I don't know if we need a formal agreement in place to be more just able to access the property to install the fence. And at that point, it becomes part of their property and their maintenance. So if it's on the town property, certainly that's where the maintenance would be with us for the long term. So that's just my 2 cents based on the agreement drafted so far.
Am I allowed to object? Am I allowed to speak?
Not yet.
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Mullins.
you. All right.
Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is for Ms. Phoebe. You've lived there for a while, and across the back, you've had basketball courts all this time. I'm curious why you've never approached the town before now for the noise and things that you have put into your note to us in the council, to council this week. I'm just wondering why you haven't approached us before now. I do totally understand the Highway 18 side or the Front Road side. I'm just wondering about the other side.
Okay. Well, we actually did years ago approach town for some type of privacy, and the solution at that time was to plant the evergreen trees or fir trees that are there. And that's what happened. That was many years ago, probably 20-25 years ago. And then with the Dasty home being there is more of a sound barrier. I mean, with everything open out, everything is amplified and all the noise is coming. And we've got a different breed of kids coming in all of the time. Now it's COVID. There's more people out there. There's a lot of kids out in the park playing, and there's the volleyball courts that weren't there before. Believe me, I didn't, the thought crossed my mind to ask for a privacy fence to go along the back of all of the residents in LaSalle, but that, you know, that would be a little bit too much. I mean, what's affecting me today is mostly that traffic, and the basketball court noise is there. We deal with it. It is a park, and as Mr. Mayor alluded to in a last meeting, that's it's something that we've always been used to, but it seems to be a lot more amplified now, and a lot more kids out there, and it's COVID, and they're not practicing safety or anything of that nature. And with the sports zone, it's only going to get busier because that's going to be a popular area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Malash.
I don't know if Joe wanted to say something first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. I'm trying to look at everybody's hands here. I missed it. Sorry, Joe.
No problem, Mr. Mayor. I just would add 2 comments for consideration. The first is that should council elect to should the fence be constructed on the property of Miss Phoebe? Again, it is traditional that we do not perform work on private property, so we would respectfully request that if that isn't the intention of council, that we contribute towards the wood fence and have Miss Phoebe arrange for the work, because we don't want to cause any further liability from our perspective of being on private property. So that's again, point number 1, if council is choosing to go in that way. Point number 2, again, I just want to make council aware that I understand the concerns coming from Miss Phoebe, and I sympathize with where she's at. But we have a number of other properties and other park that are in similar situations. And we can expect that if we begin to allow and pay for wood fence, we can expect that more and more homeowners will come, because they will have a myriad of valid reasons. They don't like the folks that are in the park that's noisy, activity that are going in the park is not what they would like to see, and things of that nature. So we are going to get more requests coming to council for similar privacy concerns. So again, it's just something to bear in mind when council is making this decision.
Thank you, Mr. Militia. Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. I think, I hate to say it, Joe, unfortunately, I don't agree with you in this situation. I don't think this is similar to any other property in the town of LaSalle. Yes, we do have many homes that back onto parks and baseball diamonds and fields, but we're looking at creating something that's supposed to drive tourism and to drive people into this location in larger numbers than we would see in any other park throughout the town besides the Valmer, really, I guess. And I think because this is our project and our development, that we have to be considerate of the neighbors who were there before we came up with this project. And we need to be able to give them the privacy that they deserve when the rest of the municipality gets to enjoy this property. So I'm still sticking with I voted for last time, which is that privacy fence. I am having an issue with the maintenance part of it, because like Mr. Militia said, if it's on their property, okay, giving them the money to install it, great, but then when it needs maintenance, it means we have to go on their property, and that causes a little bit of a problem, and I'm not sure how we fix that. I don't know if we maybe consider putting the fence on our town property and it's ours to do with as we please. I don't know if that's an option. I don't know if Mr. Militia and Mr. Miller can maybe give us insight onto that as an option. But I definitely still strongly feel that we need to put some privacy in place in this area.
Mr. Miller.
I would suggest that if council strongly believes that the fence is due to the town's initiative, and that it's the town's responsibility to install it for the privacy of the adjacent property owner, then it should be constructed on the municipal property line and maintained by the town. If that's the mindset at council, I say that in one breath, but our recommendation doesn't change from the original, is that it should be following the original recommendation that was put forward back last July. But if council really believes that it is needed, that it's the town's initiative that should be doing it, and it's because of a town project, then it should be a town fence.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Deputy Crystal, follow up?
I was just going to say, if at this time it's okay, I'd like to put that motion forward that we do put up that privacy fence, but it is to be installed on municipal property.
Okay, is that a motion? Is that clear enough, Ms. Jean? Joe, is that clear enough, the motion that Crystal Malash put forward?
As I understand the motion, it is for the town to construct a wood fence on town property and maintain that fence.
Is that correct, Crystal? So moved by Crystal,
Yep, thank you.
supported
I'll second it.
by Anita Dicio Spagnolo. Discussion on the motion. I see no questions. I have a couple. Mr. Militia, to your best of knowledge, this would be the first in the town of LaSalle that we do this.
We would have to go back through the records, but again, our normal product protocol is to put a chain link fence, and when owners want to upgrade, we contribute the cost and the owners construct the fence of their choosing. Some are wood, some are vinyl, some are decorative. We've had that situation in the past. We have a number of situations across the municipality at the Volmer where we don't have fencing. And again, our worry as administration, and the reason why the policy is in place or the practice is in place, is to control our costs when it comes to this, because we will see requests come from the Volmer, we will see requests come from Heritage Park where they have lots of activity happening there and they want increased privacy and screening. So again, that's where we're coming from, and that was the reason for the original recommendation.
Okay, just to comment on the motion. Whenever we have a delegate, whether it's 1, 10, 15, it's always unique to them. We never run across it. The problem is this is a short-term solution and it's going to bring a long tail effect. And whoever's on this council who remains on after next election, you'll be dealing with these requests going forward. So I'll ask for a recorded vote on this because as the mayor, I understand her situation. My office is across the street and I spend days there and I hear it and I see it. And you think sometimes a truck's coming through your building. Quite frankly, you put a fence in front of my office building, it's not going to help. The road hits a bump, the trucks are going to make noise, it's going to continue. And for us to put a fence at our cost, and then commercial development comes and go, oh yeah, well, we would have put a better fence or higher fence or more trees. We're putting money when maybe we shouldn't be. And we've got the administration's recommendation. I just be careful that the decisions we make today will come to follow you for a long time. And if this is precedent setting and you want to do that, that's your vote. I will be voting against it. I don't want to start anything new. It's nothing against who lives there. It's against the principle of what we're starting. You think this is going to be nothing at $15,000 or $20,000 to build a nice wood privacy fence? Wait till the requests start coming in. I agree with Mrs. Phoebe. The parks are overcrowded. Everybody's going. You pick a park and go. I saw people playing tennis this morning at 7:15 when I was at the office. They're not supposed to be there, but they were there. And they'll continue. You pick a park, you pick the neighbors. They will all tell you what's going on. I agree with Ms. Phoebe as well. Some of the youth now aren't like they used to be. People from the condos are going in the back in the park. We can talk about how bad it is, but is it our fix? Do you want to do that? I'm not going to put the town to start putting fences up because this is going to be, like I said earlier, a short resolution, but it's going to bring a long-term consequences. Again, if commercial development comes and they're willing to pay for it, we're wasting money. We go to budget sessions and try to save 5,000 here and 10,000 here, but now we're going to go spend 20,000 on a fence. I'm passionate about not spending money when we don't have to. And if commercial comes in 3 years, you'll be sitting here, hopefully, if you all get reelected, dealing with the situation where we spent this and we didn't have to. Is there any other comments? Councillor Akpata.
Your worship, I take your comments to heart, but here's how I interpret this, and my vote hasn't changed from the original, is that much the same way that we can direct developers to do certain things when projects are undertaken in the town, I view us as developing this property. So when Deputy Mayor Malash said this is unique, and I'm paraphrasing her. I believe this is a unique circumstance because we are driving the change and we are initiating the change. So much the same way that we can direct developers to do certain things, I think that we have to direct ourselves as the persons changing the use of this property for the betterment of everybody. For myself, I see it different than the other properties as described. I see this as a unique, one-time engagement. And sir, I have been wrong in the past, but I believe we're doing the right thing as the municipality developing or changing that property for the use of the others in the town. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Ekpata. The only thing I would say is it's not being developed yet. Until we find its final use, then we can deal with the fence at that time, but we don't have the final use or purpose yet. Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess mine was just a quick question. I know you keep saying if commercial development, but are we not retaining the ownership of that property going forward though? Even if commercial goes into that area, are we not still going to retain it as our property?
In the discussions Mr. Militia and I have had, which have been many, I think the agreement would be we would probably retain ownership, but then if it was going to be developed, we would have the final say, and developers, if they came to construct a restaurant, whatever, then they would have to adhere to our terms, and one of them would be privacy fence and trees and noise attenuation, whatever we have to do.
Thank you.
Do you agree with that comment, Mr. Militia? Okay, thank you. Councillor Carrick.
Just a couple quick comments. Again, this is individually unique as far as I'm concerned, and it abuts the highway. So I think that protects us anywhere else we go. And as was stated earlier in the comments, and we all agree that you can interpret us as the developer here at this point, as opposed to buying the property, knocking it down, cleaning it up, whatever the use may be coming down the road. But every development that I've seen that goes on commercial in the back is always a wooden fence that goes across for the most part. I don't think I've seen too many that haven't been. There could be the odd one, but at the end of the day, I don't see it that way. And again, I think it is such an individual site because it is on a major highway going through the town, and we don't have any other properties like this coming forward that I can recognize that or they put us in this spot. If it's on a park like Heritage, that's not commercial. So that's just all my opinion, and that's the way I look at it. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? In favor? Recorded vote, that'd be Deputy Mayor Malash, Councillor Desjardins, Councillor Dicho Spagnolo, Councillor Ekpata, and Councillor Carrick. Opposed? Councillor Reno and myself. Okay, so I would say, Mrs. Phoebe, somebody from the town will be in touch with you in relation to the fence. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have strategic and operational plans for the Benoit House.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I'm sorry.
The next topic, I'm not sure if Mr. Miller popped on the screen. I'm not sure if he has a further.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, I was just going to say, and I know Miss Phoebe left, so we'll get in contact with her. But since we're building it on our property and it's our maintenance, there's no need to contact her.
Oh, okay. Okay. Did you hear that, Ms. Phoebe?
Yep, I did.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarification, Mr. Miller.
Okay.
Thank you.
Patty Finero.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council.
Oh, there you are. You're on page 2. Sorry. Thank you.
Joining us tonight is Allison Story of ADS Consulting. She'll be available should there be any questions at the conclusion of my report. As we continue with the development of the Small Coast Waterfront project, further plans and directions must be confirmed for the operation and management of the Benoit House. The first part of the report before you tonight is regarding the operation of the Benoit House as a community museum as opposed to a heritage house or community center. It's recommended that the Benoit House be operated as a community museum. Operating the home as a heritage house or community center will limit the town to providing community and programming spaces, while operating as a community museum offers a number of benefits, including eligibility for funding for operational costs through the Community Museum Operating Grant. In addition, operating as a community museum will hold the town to a standard that ensures good care of assets and accuracy of information, to name a few. Another important benefit is that community museums have the opportunity to partner with other collecting institutions for shared or loaned exhibits, which will help to encourage repeat visitation at the museum. including historical artifacts and museum exhibits, were most requested in a survey conducted during the most recent public engagement activities for the project. The second part of the report is regarding the creation of a strategic and operational plans for the next 3 to 5 years. It is recommended that the town engage the services of Allison Story of ADS Consulting to develop these plans in 2 phases at a cost of $46,000. Ms. Story brings more than 20 years of experience in the heritage and culture field. This project would be financed through the capital funding previously approved by council for the Small Coast Waterfront project. And with that, that concludes my verbal report, and I'm available for questions.
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm reading your lips, and Deputy Mayor Valash and then Mr. Militia. I'm not sure which order you're going on.
All right. I was just getting this Zoom thing down about 6 months ago. Okay, sorry, Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you. But if Mr. Militia would like to go first, I'd be okay with that.
Again, the only comment I would make is I would ask perhaps Mrs. Fernaro and Mrs. Story if they could explain the interaction or the engagement that they will have with members of council, because I think that's an important part of this process. So if we could perhaps just give some explanation as to that.
Okay. Certainly, I will look to Ms. Story if she'd like to elaborate on the proposal that she prepared.
Thanks, Patty. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me tonight. It's great to be here. I really appreciate your time, and I do send my deepest condolences on the loss of your colleague. That was a beautiful tribute.
Thank you.
In terms of consultation, we haven't finalized the exact dates and times of when we would be coming back to council, but that will be a very important part of the planning that we do starting moving forward if this is approved. And certainly, I know Ms. Fernaro would be communicating that to you on when we would be coming back to you for consultation and review and approvals, but definitely consultation and review and lively discussion and feedback. I welcome that, and I encourage that. So that will certainly be an integral part of this process. We don't have those dates obviously finalized yet, but once we do, we'd be happy to let you know. But I really do. I welcome your feedback, and I would be happy to hear from you throughout the process about how you feel about the things are going and what any questions you might have. I think my contact information is at the top of my proposal, so happy to speak with you whenever is appropriate to answer any questions or get feedback from you on the process or the details.
Thank you. Now we can go to Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Fernaro. I love the idea of the community museum. I think it does give us a lot of opportunities. Would it still allow us to host events like tours of our own, or we've spoken in the past about really embracing the rum runners and doing like a rum tasting and something like that? Would we still be allowed to do those things if we were designated as a community museum?
Yes, we would still be able to use the space for programming purposes, in addition to having the exhibits and artifacts.
Thank you very much.
Rum tasting, that's interesting. Deputy Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. I believe I've met.
You muted yourself, Sue.
Darn. Okay. I think I've met Ms. Story before as a member of the board of directors for the John R. Park Homestead. We've had discussions about our historical story out that way, out in Colchester. And I look forward to working with you that maybe we can have some kind of sharing between the two museums. I think having it as, because our museum in Colchester goes back to 1842, so it's a little newer than some of the French family, the indigenous that we have along the river here. But I look forward to being able to work together to come up with some really good ideas on how we can make it a family-friendly, user-friendly facility that we can have, that we can partner with someone to have events at. It's a great piece of history for the town of LaSalle, and I think we really need to put our mark on the Benoit House, that we can do some really good activities teach our residents, our municipality about our history and our heritage. So I look forward to working with you on this.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. It's the opportunity to collaborate between different facilities, whether they're historic sites or heritage museums, different communities, stakeholders across the region. There's wonderful opportunities to do that. So I think that will be a great idea and something that we'll definitely keep in mind, because no one operates in isolation, especially in arts and heritage. It's a very supportive and encouraging environment, especially in Southwestern Ontario. And despite COVID bringing some challenges on how we operate, I think this is a great opportunity to reinvent that and to work together even more closely to make sure that rising tide lifts all of our boats from an arts and heritage perspective.
Be careful in the rising tide. We have floodwaters in our area. That's
true. I'm in Chatham-Kent, where we have some shoreline and erosion issues, so I will make sure my analogies reflect that.
Councillor Dicho Spagnolo.
Through you to Mrs. Finaro. Now, would this be an opportunity for schools, classes to be able to have field trips? And, I guess just some field trips. Would this be an opportunity?
Yes, exactly. That's another benefit to being designated as a community museum as opposed to just a programming space, that there would be ties into the curriculum and we would be able to have school programs come through.
Well, good discussion. I think there'll be a lot to come out of that home. I know there's been, with Ms. Hadre, I've had a lot of people contact me in relation to artifacts, history, etc. And I believe her plate is full, or she has some assistance in gathering this information. So that's good. Any other council questions? Seeing none. Councillor Desjardins.
I would make the motion to go forward with the process.
Moved by Councillor Desjardins. Looks like second by Councillor Akpata. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Story, for your time tonight.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Take care. Bye. Mr. Langlois, we have a report from the Director of Finance regarding the Fire Safety Grant Program proposed spending approval. There he is.
Hey. So just before I get started, this item number 1 and item number 2, they relate to the same grant, but they both require separate resolutions.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions, but basically this here grant requires council approval before we can spend the money. So that's why the report's been written. But
okay.
I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Councillor Reno. All in favor? That carries. And on the second, it's the same thing, just to approve the agreement, correct, Mr. Long? Okay, Deputy Mayor Malash and Councillor Carrick, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Dale, you're again draft procurement policy. I believe you're going to have a little presentation for us.
Yep. So your worship, members of council, every 5 years, the town's required to review our procurement policy and update it accordingly to meet new legislation and any new internal process changes. The Town of LaSalle's policy was last updated in January of 2016, as noted in my report. Many legislative changes and internal changes have occurred since then. So I have a short presentation which will outline the major factors and changes in the new draft policy. And I'll also walk council through Appendix B, which outlines the entire procurement process from start when the budget request comes in until finish when the vendor is actually paid. It's as you can see, the spreadsheet's pretty big and it's hard to read the small writing. So it should be a little bit easier to see in my presentation here. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you, Dale.
Okay. I'm just going to start the slideshow. Okay. So first, the purpose of the proposed procurement policy is to ensure that publicly Funded purchases of goods and services are acquired through a process that is compliant, open, fair, and transparent. It outlines the responsibilities of town staff throughout each stage of the procurement process, and that the procurement processes are managed consistently. The main priorities of the draft policy: number one, it ensures that the legislative requirements are met, and I'll explain those on the next slide. It ensures that proper internal controls are met. There's a slide on that as well. It ensures that council is made aware and/or approves significant purchases according to various thresholds, and also with the lower thresholds that appropriate levels of management approve the purchases as well. It ensures the best value and quality of the products and services that we purchase. That basically means the best price, and then also on certain different types of products, we want to make sure that it's the best quality that we can get. So the new legislative requirements, they came out in late 2017, and we have been meeting these requirements, but now they're just officially documented in our draft proposed procurement policy. So the first is the Canadian Economic Trade Agreement, and the second is the Canada Free Trade Agreement. And they're very similar. They just have different thresholds. So obviously we got to look at the lower thresholds of each. And the biggest factors are that for any goods or services over $100,000, we're required to have an open competitive process for probably 90 to 95% of the different types of goods and services that we purchase. And then for construction related projects, that threshold's $250,000. And then the other, it also requires us to during the open competitive process, there's minimum timelines that we need to have that on our bids and tenders website. And then next, we cannot discriminate based on the location of the vendor. So next, the internal controls, that just makes sure that we have proper levels of authorization. Oh, sorry, my slides aren't changing. Apologize for that. I'm sorry, let me just restart that here.
Dale, is there a way you can possibly make it larger as well? Because hard for me, I can't read anything, so I'm just assuming we're following your slides.
Okay, I apologize for that.
That's okay.
What slide are you seeing right now?
I think it says number 4. Well, we see the top one, number 1, but on the left side, there's we can see legislative requirements, I think.
Okay, I'm just going to do it. Okay, if you go back here, just back to your share screen. Slideshow. Stop share. And then go back to share screen. And then it should give you an option to pick. You want to pick, not this one, not that one. Okay.
Okay, start presentation first, sorry. Yeah, start your presentation so you can.
Start it first.
Just clamp on that one, so you want to be sharing that one.
All right, you're gonna have to take over. Where is it? This one here. Here, hold it. You gotta come over this way.
Dale, it's a heck of a way to get more airtime.
Sorry about this.
That's okay.
Well, I'll just take the opportunity to introduce Ian Middleton. He's one of our IT administrators here at the town of LaSalle, does fabulous work, and we'll have this up and running in no time.
Maybe Dale could mute his mic.
Oh, here we come. That's better.
It's better? Okay.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. Lifesaver. Okay. I'm sorry about that again. Okay, so internal controls, we make sure we have proper levels of authorization based on various different dollar thresholds. We have proper approval and signing authority. We have proper review by higher levels of management. We have appropriate segregation of duties. So the individual that's making the purchase would be different than the individual signing the contract. And then we have random internal checks and continuous education, just to make sure that the rules are followed. And if someone makes a mistake, we educate them and make sure it doesn't happen again. So I just want to go through some of the definitions quickly that are in the policy. So a direct purchase, pretty self-explanatory. That basically means it's a smaller dollar threshold. We don't need to go through any formal request for quotes or tenders. An informal request for a quote, that could be a phone call or an email just to get a couple different quotes, usually on smaller thresholds. A formal request for quote, that's a formal document. It's generally used for higher dollar values. A request for tender, so that differs than a request for quote because it actually has specifications listed. So for example, if we're purchasing a fire truck, we have detailed specifications that must be met. So that would be a request for tender document versus if we're buying a standard pickup truck for the parks department, that might be a request for quote. Then there's the request for proposal. And that basically, when there's a purchase that's not solely based on price, there could be, the best example would be a master plan. There's a qualitative factor. So there's a scorecard that will base different scores and evaluate different presentations. And the price is always a part of that as well. And then experience and other factors that are determined necessary. A request for standing offer, that's an arrangement where the town may buy a good or service from a vendor over a specific timeline. And the arrangement includes all terms. So example would be our office supplies. We have a standard agreement. We know all the terms and conditions for each different product. And then there's a request for pre-qualification. That's very similar to a request for standing offer, but that is basically used when it's the purchases don't happen as often. There's a specific level of expertise that's involved. For example, an HVAC system. If that fails, we don't really have time to go through the procurement process. So we want to have some pre-qualified vendors that we can go to, whether it be on a rotational basis or whatnot, and we can just go and get our HVAC system fixed. So next, I'm just going to walk through determining our procurement strategy. So items, so first I just want to note, these are the minimum requirements. We can always go to a higher level of procurement strategy if we want, but these are just the minimum levels. So dollar values under $10,000, we can propose a direct purchase, whether that be through petty cash, which is typically up to $100, a credit card, or a purchase order. Optional, as I mentioned, we can do an RFQ, a formal or an informal RFQ, RFP, or a request for tender. Then we get to the range $10,000 to $50,000. That can be an informal request for quote. And then when we reach the $50,000 to $100,000, that's more of a formal request for quote, a formal document. We usually would go through our bids and tenders website where it's open to, and anyone can bid on the request for quote. And then over $100,000, that's where we're legislatively required to have an open competitive process. So unless it's one of those items such as insurance or whatnot, or a hydro bill that meets the exceptions, we have to go on our bids and tenders website and have an open competitive process that any vendor can bid on the product. So next, just walking through the approval authorities. So different, what this varies from our previous procurement policy. Our previous procurement policies authorization levels varied depending on type of purchase. So for example, there was different levels of authority for material and supplies purchases versus consulting and professional services versus single or sole sourcing. What this proposed policy does, the thresholds really aren't that much different, but they standardize them. It's more based on dollar value amounts for regardless of what type of product or service we're purchasing. And then next, I just want to mention, so the previous policy had set out, if you're a supervisor, this is your maximum level of purchase authority. If you're a manager, this is your maximum level of authority. What this proposed policy does, it allows the department head to determine, to delegate different authorities to their supervisors and managers. And the reason that we've changed it is because different departments, managers and supervisors typically purchase different dollar values of product. For example, our manager of fleet and facility and our manager of facilities typically buy more expensive products. If something happens at the Volmer and a pump needs to be replaced, those are typically more expensive items. And same with our fleet. If we need to purchase a vehicle, those are typically more expensive items. So they'd require a higher threshold for approval versus a manager in our culture and rec department. Typically, those expenses aren't as high. So that threshold could be lower, maybe $10,000 for a supervisor or $20,000 versus maybe a $50,000 to $100,000 threshold in the public works department. So for direct purchases, you can kind of see it explains it in the policy, but that's typically under $10,000, and the strategy, which is the method in which we purchase, is determined by the department head or their delegate. There would not be a formal document because it's a direct purchase, and then any contract or related document would be signed by the department head. There's an asterisk there because if it's a small dollar amount, there's typically not a contract, so the purchaser can sign off, at a level lower than the department head. For purchase orders or contracts between $10,000 and $100,000, that requires a department head and treasurer approval for the procurement strategy, and then the department head and treasurer would sign off on any contracts. Over $100,000, that's very unusual to do a direct purchase over $100,000, but that would need the treasurer approval, and then that would have to be signed by the department head, treasurer, and CAO. So next, going through to the competitive processes. So informal requests for quotes would be between $10,000 and $50,000. The department head or their delegate could come up with a strategy and create the document. The contracts would always be signed by the department head. That's the same with the formal request for quotes between $50,000 and $100,000, the same authority levels. Public tendering, when we get over $100,000, between $100,000 and $250,000, the department head and our procurement officer would determine the appropriate procurement strategy. The final document would be signed off by the department head and the treasurer, and then the contract would be signed by the department head and the treasurer, the CAO. Above $250,000, the only difference is that regardless if it's approved in the budget or not, we would bring that forward to council before anything is signed. And that's the threshold. I think that's consistent with the threshold that we have in our current policy. Our threshold sometimes is 500,000, but typically we always go forward to council with our purchases. If there's any questions at this point in time, I can answer them. Councillor Garrett?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Dale. So just need you to back up just a hair. The direct contract there for 100,000 or above. And if you go back to the last slide, can you do that? Co-signed by the department head and treasurer or CAO. Then go back to the next one. Now, isn't for those kind of prices, other than maybe emergencies, wouldn't that stuff not come to council in the budget process?
It does, and I'm gonna. That's exactly a valid point. I'm going to walk you through that as well. So I could just mention now. So because it's approved, a lot of these purchases that we bring forward to council, such as trucks and whatnot, they're actually approved already during the budget process. So what we're proposing is, rather than come to council a second time, if they're within the approved budget that was already approved by council, we're looking at going forward, getting the appropriate sign-offs by administration, purchasing it, and then every quarter bringing a report to council that explains, that shows what we've purchased, what the budget was, just to keep council aware of what we've purchased. And then if we go out for tender and it comes back significantly higher than the budget, we put a threshold of 10%, the greater of 10% and $10,000 higher than budget, then we need council approval before we purchase it. Just because it's significantly above the budget. If it's the greater of 10% or $10,000, we propose that the treasurer or the CAO or delegate can approve that, as long as there's sufficient funds within our reserves and our budget. And then we always will report to council on that. So the only councillors I can see is Councillor Carrick and Mayor Bondi. So if there's anyone else who has a question, please just let me know, because I can't see you.
We muted them all, Dale.
Okay.
Just kidding. No, go ahead, Dale.
So next, I'm just going to walk through the flow chart. It is very difficult to read because it's a pretty big process and it's hard to fit it all on one page. So I've blown it up over a couple slides, and I'll just walk everyone through the process. So the beginning, as I mentioned, the user, which would be the person using the product, or the manager or supervisor, they right at the budget process, they put in their request to include it in the budget. It's approved through the budget process when we do our in December. In council, we present every capital purchase and any significant operating items to council, and it's either taken out of the budget at that time or approved. So the next, when we look at actually going forward and purchasing the item, we look at our procurement thresholds that I mentioned in the past slides. So if it's less than the $10,000 threshold, we can direct purchase it. And if it's greater than, the managers and supervisors or department heads will work with the procurement officer to determine whether we can use an informal or a formal process, and create the specifications if required, and also post them on our bids and tenders software for an open competitive process. Next, once we receive all the bids, there's the tender opening, the price analysis. If it's a request for a proposal, that score, the proposal's rated against the scorecard. There is guidance for the evaluation committee members to make the decisions. If the cost is over the $250,000 mark, the procurement officer will help to create a report for council for approval before any contract signed. And then also, as I mentioned, the procurement officer will identify any of the expenditures over $50,000 or and create a report for a quarterly report to council to just so they're aware of what we've purchased over the past quarter that would have been approved as part of the budget process. So next we look at it, if the prices come in and they're within the budget, we move forward with the purchase. If they're greater than, if they're within 10% or $10,000 of the budget, the CAO can approve if there's appropriate funding or as delegate. If it's higher than those thresholds, we'll do a report to council to get approval. And if it's approved, it will go back to the procurement officer who will work with the user to award the contract, assist in the purchase order agreement, posting the competitive bidding results if applicable. If there's a request per the CETA and CAFTA agreements, we have to debrief the companies that bid on the product that weren't successful. Assist in following up for required insurance certificates and bonds, following up with the user on the supplier's delivery progress if we haven't received it in a while. So we put the order in, the supplier delivers the goods or services, they provide us with the invoice for payment. The invoice either goes to our accounts payable department or directly to the user. Now, a couple council meetings ago, I mentioned that we're working on an electronic process where hopefully we're going to be able to get all the invoices and bills to come into accounts payable. It can be scanned into the system and then sent to the appropriate user or manager for approval electronically, which will speed up the process. The user will receive the goods or services, make sure everything is received appropriately and in good condition, and code the invoice to go to the appropriate accounts. Then procurement will follow up with the user on the supplier's performance, because if there is poor performance, we can document it, and basically for a period of up to 5 years, if we wish, that vendor, we don't have to select that vendor in the future if they've given us poor quality goods or services. The invoices then go to accounts payable for review and approval, and then the payment goes to the supplier once we're satisfied. And that's kind of the whole process from the beginning to the ending. Sometimes it's a little easier to look at it visually like this. So if there's any questions on the proposed policy, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Councillor Carrick.
No, just a comment. This is very comprehensive and good job. And I think this covers a lot of bases. And hopefully there's a lot of safety nets built in so nothing eludes us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Carrick. Council's pleasure. Councillor Akpata.
Just one question, Your Worship. As we start to purchase components, as you know, sometimes you can buy A through Z all at one point, or you can just buy A and then eventually move to B. So through you, Your Worship, to Dale, if we have a comprehensive purchase of $9,999, that's under the $10,000 threshold, but we're buying a $50,000 item, what's the safeguards to not have me submit 5 different components that are under the threshold, but collectively the SKU that we're going to end up holding is worth $50,000?
We have to look at it as a whole. And actually in the CETA and CFTA, it actually mentions that at their threshold level, you can't cut a service into 2 parts to get it under that $100,000 level. So
perfect.
We do the same with our purchases to meet our thresholds as well.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. That was the only question I had.
Thank you, Councillor Akpata. Councillor Desjardins.
I was just going to make a motion to accept the draft proposal for the procurement policy.
Moved by Councillor Desjardins. Support Councillor Riccio Spagnolo. Discussion on the motion. I have one question, Mr. Langlois. On page 78, you have a policy that says you're going to maintain procurement-related records for a minimum of 3 years or for longer period in accordance with the town's record retention policy. So what's your time frame under our town's record retention policy?
Well, for accounts payable invoices, I think we have to keep them for 6 years.
Okay.
And I think the actual procurement documents, we only have to keep for 3 years.
Okay, so it says 3 and unless further by the town, but we're still at 3. That's okay. Thank you. All in favor of the motion? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Langua.
Yep. Sorry for the technical difficulties earlier.
We're all learning. I have to learn to turn my mic on when I speak. Is Chantel with us? I have to go to the other.
I can.
Okay, you're going to take care. Okay.
Yeah.
So the 2020 year-end reports.
I'd be happy to answer any questions. These reports we bring forward to council every year. They're approved as part of our audit requirements.
Council's pleasure. Deputy Mayor Malash. Move the report, seconded by Councillor Carrick. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. You got off easy on that one, Mr. Langua. Engineer appointment, Decentel Drain, Mr. Osborne, or? There you are. I have to find you what screen you're on.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. Not too much to add to this report. We received a petition under Section 4 of the Drainage Act to formalize what's kind of informally known as Decentel Drain. So the landowners in there had submitted a petition, and we're just going to start the Drainage Act process here.
Council questions? Councillor Reno, move the recommendation, or you have a question? Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is to Jonathan. Jonathan, where does that drain lie? Just so if we get questions by people in the community, where does that drain go?
I have a sketch here. I can share my screen maybe and show everyone. But it's down by the River Canard, the Bowstring Bridge.
Well, as you find that drain, Jonathan, I've lived here 33 years and I thought I knew every drain and ditch in the municipality, and that's a new one on me.
I don't know if can all see that sketch?
No, it's not. It's not up there, Jonathan.
It's not up there.
It's in our agenda, page 116.
Yeah, it is. It is. Sorry.
That's fine. I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
It basically starts almost behind the KC Hall on Malden Road and proceeds south.
Yeah, it's kind of southwest, and then outlets under Malden Road by the Bowstring Bridge.
Right.
So it's not a terribly long drain. There's not a large number of landowners, but it's just not a formally municipal drain at this point.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Your Worship.
You're welcome. Council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Reno, supported by Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Jonathan. Mark Beggs, Public Works, Parks Tennis Court Resurfacing 2021 Capital Budget.
Good evening, members of council. The report before you tonight actually kind of follows Dale's procurement policy nicely. It's a project where we had budgeted $30,000 to redo 2 tennis courts at Vincenter Park and at Brian Briggs Park. And after we got some pricing in to do the work, it has come in a little higher than what we had budgeted. So we did have $30,000 in the budget, and the prices have come in at around $42,500 for our cheapest price that we did get. So this report is asking for the additional $12,500 to complete the entire project, and we would be funding that from the Parks Reserve Fund. And I'm available for any questions there might be.
Council's pleasure. Councillor Akpata, move the recommendation or question?
I have a question, Your Worship.
Sure.
Through you to Mr. Beggs, sir, can you just explain so I can understand the differential in the budget and what the price came in? Is it simply because of increase in product, or, you know, I just want to make sure that when we budget, because I look at this and I kind of say to myself, did we miss something when we put these budgets together? So I'm looking for some insight as to why the differentiation in the budgeted price and the actual price submitted by the vendors.
Yeah, no problem. I think in this case, there's some COVID-related price increases. Typically, we budget around $15,000 per court resurfacing, just what we've seen in the past. And this one did come in a bit higher than that for each court. I think the costs of the materials, the acrylic coatings that get used on these courts, that pricing may have gone up a little bit for the actual contractor doing the work, and I think that's probably part of what this came from. Probably when we are doing the budget, in some cases we do look at a price that we maybe had from a previous year and use that, and then when the actual prices come in, sometimes it's a little higher, and sometimes it's a little lower too. So we kind of get one way or the other sometimes.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Councillor Dicho Spagnolo.
Through you to Mr. Beggs, what is the life expectancy of these tennis courts?
Well, what we're doing is basically doing a repair on them. So we're sealing cracks and resurfacing them. So I think we're hoping to get another around 10 years out of them. But obviously, since they are starting to crack and fail, that could be a little bit less, just depending on how our winters go over a couple of years. But hopefully we can get another good 10 years out of them.
Okay, thank you.
Council's pleasure. Moved by Deputy Mayor Meloche, second by Councillor Carrick. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Beggs. Mr. Burgess, street name request for the Harmony Lakes subdivision, and I believe we have Ms. Muir in case there are questions. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mayor and members of council, the report before you is with regards to the proposed street naming for the Harmony Lakes subdivision. These names were reviewed by staff, and there were no objections to the proposed names. As you've mentioned, Ms. Muir is available for any questions, as well as I. Thank you.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is for Alan. Alan, last year we were looking at a policy for road naming. Are we any closer to that policy?
I believe Mr. Solani is working with council services with regards to that report. Maybe he might be able to give you some more information.
Mr. Solani, welcome.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council. That policy was reviewed by administration, and we're at the stage right now where direction was given to look at adding additional historic names. So additional research is being done through the clerk's office and through Don's office to come up with additional names to be added to the list. As council is aware, the policy currently is worded is that it's up to the developer to bring names forward. And if council doesn't agree with that, it can pick names from the list. But currently the list has very few names on it. So that's where it stands right now, is to add additional names that are of historic or cultural significance to the community to that list, and then bring that forward back to council.
Thank you.
Council questions? Council pleasure. Deputy Mayor Meloche moves the recommendation, supported by Councillor Dicho Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Ms. Muir. Mr. Burgess, you're still here.
Yes. Good evening. Before you this evening is a request for a site plan approval. The application is for a 230 square meter plaza with a 2-story building with 2 apartment units above it. The site plan is in full conformity with the zoning bylaw and including parking and other factors. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Council questions? Councilor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to thank the proponent. It's nice to see a little bit of new life being brought to Front Road, and this will be a nice addition to that part of Front Road. So thank you very much.
Council's pleasure. Moved by Councilor Reynolds, second by Councilor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Burgess. I concur, Councilor Reynolds. It's nice to see some development on Front Road. Maybe it's spurred by small coast waterfront development. Minutes of the Parks, Rec, and Events Committee meeting held March 18th. And that's Councilor Akpata.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. As you see, progression on the virtual engagement that we're doing with the community. Unfortunately, we talked about opening and we talked about preparing for this. So again, beyond our control, but thoughtfully crafted and thoughtfully put together. So when the time is right, Your Worship, staff have come up with a very comprehensive plan to make sure that we do everything in accordance with the rule of law, safely, and to make sure that our partners in the use of the facility are aware and involved. I defer to Ms. Fernaro if she has anything to add.
I do not have anything further to add, but I'm available should there be any questions.
Council's pleasure. Moved by Councilor Reno, or you have a question? Move. Okay, moved by Councilor Reno, second by Councilor Didicho Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. University of Windsor Convocation Photo Roadshow. Anything you'd like to add, Ms. Hadre?
Thank you, Mayor Bondi and members of council. The report is pretty self-explanatory. We're partnering with the University of Windsor for their graduation roadshow. They are going into all of the municipalities to be able to share their graduation ceremony with residents of that municipality. So there are no real setup requirements for us other than blocking off the parking lot at the Riverdance building for them. They will be allowing about 60 students in between 11 and 2. That's about 5 students an hour for some photo ops. They will follow all COVID protocols. If we're in lockdown, then the event won't happen. So nothing to worry about there. They are following those protocols. I am available if there are any questions.
Council's pleasure. Councilor Reno.
Receive.
Motion receive and supported by Deputy Mayor Malash. All in favor? That carries. Thank you, Ms. Hadre. 2020 fourth quarter report. Mr. Langwa, any comments?
Just very high level, given the COVID pandemic, it was a tough year. It was an extraordinary year. There's a lot of different variances within the report, but on the positive note, we did have a lot of supplemental assessment. We had healthy building activity around the town, which really helped us out. And then we did have the higher level of government. We did receive some significant funding from them to help with our shortfalls of revenue and some additional expenses. But I'd be happy to answer any questions should there be any.
Councilor Akpata.
Through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Langlois. Do you have any concerns, sir, on the document that's before us right now?
No concerns.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for not sharing your screen, Mr. Langlois. Pleasure. Moved by Councilor Desjardins, supported by Councilor Didicho Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. 2020 building division activity, which Mr. Langlois just reported, we have higher than budgeted building permits and building activity.
Yeah, just and again, we had the last number of years have been very successful. It wasn't too long ago where in our building reserve, we had about over $1 million deficit. Since then, Mr. Solani and our building department, they revised our fees they updated them. They hadn't been updated in a long time to reflect the actual cost of doing building inspections. That combined with the high amount of building activity helped dig us out of that hole. And now we have a nice healthy surplus. So, it's always good to have a surplus for those years, those rainy days when the building activity stalls for a bit. So we're in a good position there.
Mr. Longwood, just to clarify, and the money that comes in there has to stay in that department, can't be allocated anywhere else.
That's correct. The building activity must fund itself. It's just like water and wastewater reserves. They must fund themselves as well.
Okay. Thank you. Council's pleasure. Councilor Reno, question?
Hi, my question, Dale, I think as we were just gushing about the numbers for the new building permits and things up around the 150 percentile for the entire year after 4 months, actually. Do you have an idea of about how many starts that is so far?
In the building department? Mr. Solani might be able to answer that better than myself.
Just to clarify, Councilor Reno, the numbers we're looking at are for year-end 2020.
I apologize.
That's okay, but it's still a good question in relation to new starts. Mr. Solani.
We're tracking basically in keeping with the numbers that we saw last year. So we expect that at the end of this year, the numbers will be similar to 2020.
And what do we do, 250 or so, Mr. Solani?
It was I believe either 250 or 260. I don't have it in front of me, but it was in that range, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Council's pleasure. Motion received, Councilor Reno, support by Deputy Mayor Malash. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Q1 council member attendance at meetings. It's nice to see 100% participation. Kind of hard to miss when we have Zoom meetings, but council's pleasure. Moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, support by Councilor Adiccio Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Planning Act timelines. A letter from Mr. Clark. I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor Malash. Received? Okay, support. Councilor Desjardins, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Summary of reports to council. Motion received, Councilor Carrick and Councilor Reno, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. Bylaws. On all 6 bylaws, 3 readings, Councilor Reno and Councilor Desjardins, all in favor. That carries. Thank you very much. Council questions. Councilor Akpata.
Through your worship to administration, I received a question from a resident about our bylaw as it relates to sheds. And I'm always cautious when I give advice. So the question that this citizen had is, they understand that there's a municipal bylaw as to what you can put in your backyard and call it a shed. And is there a set square footage? Is there a set height? Is there a set designation on the lot line, near the lot line, near different things, if it is a small shed? So that's question 1. If it is a shed that's deemed to be larger than a shed, then what does the citizen do?
Good question, Councilor Akpata, and Mr. Burgess is going to take that one. I guess we'll
Thank you, Your Worship. Basically, what we have currently in our bylaws, we have 2 different variations and then also within the residential zones. So we have a shed that's under 10 by 10, which allows you to go down to a 2-foot side yard setback for the rear and the side. and there is a set height. Then we have a shed that's over 10 by 10. When you get over 10 by 10, it's a 4-foot side yard setback and a rear yard setback. But there's also a percentage as far as the maximum size. So depending on the lot, it does cap out at a maximum of 100 square meters. And then if this property is in the agricultural area, then there is a maximum size of 200 square meters. But there's also a 10% cap. So it's a little bit complicated. By all means, if you wish, you can direct the individual's question over to our department, whether our building staff or our planning staff will be more than happy to talk to the individual and give them the lowdown on what they can build and how big it can be.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. I will follow up after the meeting with the individual. That's it, Your Worship. I appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, I believe Mr. Langlois indicated that he can't hear you at the moment.
Okay, that was a good one. I'm trying to be quiet here as I move papers and I forget to, don't say anything, Mr. Longwell. Okay, was everybody just signaling that I was muted? Or is there a question or a statement? None. Okay. Reports from committees. Notice of a motion. None. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, viewing audience. Everybody. Oh, Deputy Mayor Malash.
Mr. Militia is going to say it.